It didn't start with a press release, no televised announcement, no dramatic royal confrontation. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Just a blank space, a space on the wall where a portrait used to hang. Prince Harry in full military regalia, smiling, sharp, dignified, framed in mahogany, lit with reverence, gone, not moved, not relocated, removed. Without warning, without ceremony. And somehow, that said more than words ever could. We're trained to look for headlines, for declarations, for the kinds of stories that scream for our attention. But sometimes, the loudest messages are the quietest ones. A missing photograph, a newly painted wall, a silence where once there was legacy. So the question isn't what happened, it's why now. Because this wasn't just an act of interior decoration. This was King Charles making a statement. Not to the press, not even to his son, to the world. And to history. A message written not in ink, but in absence. So what does it mean when a king, a father, chooses to erase the image of his own blood from the royal spaces he controls? And more importantly, what does he gain by doing it? This story is not about scandal. It's not even really about family. It's about power, about image, and about something we rarely get to witness in real time, the deliberate re-editing of royal history. Because let's be honest, this didn't happen overnight, but its unveiling was timed with surgical precision. Something triggered this. Something pushed King Charles past the point of return. But what? We'll get to that. Not yet. First, let's sit with the weight of what's already happened. Because if you've been watching closely, you know this isn't just about a wall in Clarence House. This is about legacy. This is about the crown deciding, once and for all, who belongs in the story it tells the world and who no longer does. Let's rewind. There was a time, not that long ago, when Prince Harry's face was everywhere, in palace halls, museum exhibits, souvenir shops, military tributes. He was the people's prince, the veteran, the rebel with a cause, the royal who hugged kids, danced with African school children, and dodged press questions with a half smile that said, "I know who I am." And maybe he did, until he didn't. Because since stepping back from royal duties, or was it being pushed, Harry has found himself in a slow, painful slide away from the institution that once held him up. Not with a bang, but with a ghosting. At first, it was subtle. Less frequent mentions in royal speeches, photo placements shifting, invitations arriving later than usual. Not at all. But this? The removal of his official portraits from multiple royal residences? This is not subtle. This is deliberate, and it is public. So, again, why now? Why, after years of tabloid wars, Netflix tell-alls, memoir bombshells, and podcast headlines, has this act, the silent taking down of a portrait, landed with such weight? Because portraits matter in monarchy. They are not decoration. They are declarations of status, of favor, of history. They are the crown's way of saying, this person matters. This person is eternal. To remove one is to say, they no longer do. But here's the uncomfortable truth. No royal portrait has ever been removed without consequence. Not Diana. Not Margaret. Not even Edward VIII, whose own fall from grace still echoes through the halls of Windsor like a cautionary whisper. And now, Harry joins that list. Except there's a twist. This time, it's not about abdication. Not about betrayal in the traditional sense. It's about control. Who owns the narrative? Who shapes the legacy? And King Charles? He's reshaping his monarchy in real time, tightening the frame, trimming the cast. He is, quite literally, curating history. And in doing so, he's sending a message not just to Harry, but to all of us. A message that says, this is the royal family now, not then, not them. But we have to ask, who's next? Because if Harry can be erased this cleanly, this publicly, what does that mean for Meghan? For their children? For the very idea of bloodline versus institution? Let me take you inside the palace. Not just the corridors and offices, but the decisions, the whispered directives, the staff hesitations. The moment someone realized this is the beginning of the end, because the decision to take down a portrait doesn't happen in a vacuum. It is signed, it is archived, it is discussed, and it always, always comes at a cost. But perhaps the most haunting part, Harry may not even know it's happened. Or worse, maybe he does, and he's decided not to respond. Because what can you say when your father, the King of England, has chosen to erase your face from the walls of your childhood? When the institution you were born into is now airbrushing you out, you don't respond, you absorb. You move on. You build walls of your own. But you never forget, and neither does the public. Because here's the twist no one saw coming. When they took Harry off the wall, the public noticed. Fast. Royal watchers. Tourists, former staff. People who know those halls like the back of their hands. And when they saw that empty space, the internet lit up. Not with outrage, with curiosity, with unease. Because this wasn't just a family issue, it was a constitutional one. If Harry, the king's own son, could be removed with no explanation, what else could be changed? What else had already been rewritten? That's the story we're here to tell. Not a scandal, not a feud, but a quiet act of royal erasure, and what it tells us about monarchy in the age of media. We'll follow the missing portraits. We'll dig into the orders. We'll uncover the shifting allegiances inside the palace. And we'll ask the question no one dares say out loud. Has King Charles already made the decision to never forgive Prince Harry? And if so, what comes next? Because the walls are empty now, but the consequences, they're just beginning to unfold. And in the next chapter, we'll take you to the very moment it started. When a visitor stepped into a familiar room at Clarence House, looked to the corner where Prince Harry's portrait had always been, and saw nothing. No frame, no outline, no trace, just freshly painted wall, and a silence that would echo louder than any royal statement ever could. What came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. You ever walk into a room and immediately feel that something's gone, off? You can't explain it at first. The furniture is the same, the carpet, the air. But there's this strange emptiness, like the soul of the space has slipped out through a crack in the plaster. That's what happened at Clarence House, one of the official royal residences, historic, intimate, return. A place where family and formality have always blurred. But on this day, this quiet, overcast morning, a particular corridor felt colder than usual. A trusted visitor, not a reporter, not a tabloid spy, but someone known to the royal household, had arrived early for a scheduled meeting. One of those routine engagements, a charity update, a briefing on an upcoming event, something small, something forgettable. Except it wasn't. Because as this visitor made their way through the familiar passage, they stopped, stared, and said, almost involuntarily, "Where's Harry?" Not Prince Harry, not the Duke of Sussex, just Harry. Because in that corner of the corridor, near the subtle gold light fixture, there had always been a portrait, a mid-sized oil painting, warm tones, slightly informal compared to the others. It showed Harry around the time of his return from Afghanistan, in uniform but relaxed, heroic but human, gone, no replacement. No sign of redecoration, just a fresh coat of soft cream paint, still drying, if you looked closely. The kind of silence that doesn't just erase, it rewrites. Now, people walk by royal portraits all the time and don't notice. It's part of the palace texture. They're expected, they're supposed to be there, like marble busts or the scent of polished oak. But when one disappears, especially that one, people notice. Not loudly, not immediately. But the absence, lingers. This wasn't just any hallway. This was one of the private corridors used for internal meetings. Less public, more personal. The walls here didn't just honor royals. They told the story of the family, of lineage, of loyalty. So why would that portrait vanish? And more importantly, why would no one mention it? Now, here's where it gets stranger. The removal hadn't been announced. There was no public list of rotated artworks, no press release about modernization or restoration, and yet, within 48 hours, similar observations began to surface elsewhere. Sandringham, Balmoral. Even inside one of the smaller reception rooms at Windsor Castle. In every case, Harry's likeness, once displayed with respect and permanence, was gone, not replaced with anything else, not recontextualized, just erased. Have you ever seen a memory removed in real time? That's what this was. It was like watching history unwrite itself. One nail, one frame, one blank wall at a time. And when the whispers began, the official palace response was predictable. No comment, no confirmation, no denial. Which, for royal observers, meant everything. Because in palace terms, silence isn't absence, it's strategy. The walls were speaking, and what they were saying was chilling. Bowles, he is no longer part of this. Not the family, that's too personal to untangle here, but the institution, the firm, the machine. The one that decides which faces to show and which ones to forget. But let's pull back for a moment, because this wasn't just about Clarence House. It wasn't just about one missing portrait. It was about a pattern. You see, over the years, the royal family has curated its image through an almost obsessive control of visual symbols. Think about it: portraits, postcards, coins, stamps, gallery exhibits, souvenir tea tins. Every visual reference to a royal figure has layers of meaning. Subtle, deliberate, intentional. So when those references begin to change, quietly, without explanation, it signals more than just a shift in decor. It signals a shift in narrative, a recalibration of who belongs and who doesn't. It's not unlike what regimes have done throughout history, from emperors to revolutionaries. Erase the portrait, rewrite the memory. But monarchy does it softer, slower, under the guise of tradition, of refreshing the collection. And for a long time, Harry's place in that collection was secure. He was born into it, christened into it, photographed into it. A son of Diana, a brother to a future king, a soldier, a royal, a symbol. But now the symbol was gone, and the space it left behind was haunting. One staffer, anonymously of course, described it this way: "It's like removing a photograph from a family album. The page still exists. The other faces remain, but the gap is noticeable and uncomfortable." And that word, uncomfortable, has been swirling inside the palace for some time now. Because here's the contradiction that no one wants to talk about. Prince Andrew still has portraits in some royal properties. Yes, that Prince Andrew, the one whose scandals nearly sunk the monarchy's public standing. The one stripped of royal titles and patronages. His image remains. Not everywhere, not in high traffic spaces, but tucked away, preserved. Harry's? Gone. Which forces a question that cuts deeper than protocol. What does the institution truly consider unforgivable? Speaking to Oprah? Signing a Netflix deal? Writing a memoir? Or is it something else entirely? Something less obvious? Something more symbolic? Because maybe this isn't about action. Maybe it's about allegiance. Harry didn't just step back from royal duties. He stepped out of line, out of narrative, out of control. And for the monarchy, for this monarchy, that might be the one sin it can't forgive, which makes the removal of his portraits not just symbolic, but punitive. An institutional warning. Step outside our story, and we'll write you out of it. But the story doesn't end here, because as more portraits disappeared, questions started landing in inboxes, calls were made, and someone, somewhere inside the palace, panicked. Not publicly, not visibly, but just enough to make a mistake. A small one. A logistical hiccup that would soon unravel into something much bigger. Because the removal of the portraits wasn't just aesthetic. It was administrative, and there's always a record. Always. But that's a story for the next room and the next whisper. Because what came next didn't stay within the walls of Clarence House. It spread. And at the center of it all was an internal directive no one was supposed to see, a directive that would change everything and expose just how far King Charles was willing to go to define his monarchy, even if it meant defining it without his youngest son. It started with a printer jam, an ordinary, frustrating glitch, the kind that palace staff encounter every day and solve without a second thought. But this one happened at the wrong time, with the wrong document, and in front of exactly the wrong person. The staffer, let's call her Anne, had been working late, just another evening buried under scheduling notes, floral requests, and the kind of endless coordination that keeps royal appearances running like clockwork. But this document, it wasn't a schedule. It was labeled Internal Directive 32C, Visual Realignment Orders. Doesn't sound scandalous, does it? Just another bureaucratic file. Except when Anne cleared the paper jam and looked closer, her stomach turned. There was a list. Not of artwork. Not of locations.